What's the best way to use a book to grow your business? Do you know when it makes sense to give your book away for free? And does your book need to sell a lot of copies in order for it to help you? Well, you're about to find out. Welcome to the I Want to Know podcast. My guest today is Andy Brown. He has those questions, and I can't wait to answer them. Andy's an award winning advisor and coach for people based businesses, helping them grow and increase their value. He's also the author of The Emotional Overdraft 10 Simple Changes for Balancing Business Success and Wellbeing. Published on January 22nd, The Emotional Overdraft identifies the 10 drivers of an emotional overdraft and the hidden cost line in many leaders' P&L statements. The book enables leaders to create a healthier relationship with their business, loved ones, and themselves. He's joining me from the UK. Hey, Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me. And it's really good to hear someone say that about the book out loud. It's getting very exciting. It's very soon.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got to be wild, right? You work on it for so long and it's just this idea in your head and all of a sudden it's a real thing. And now you get to talk about it forever until you're sick of it.
Yeah, I'm approaching that already, but not
And
really.
I'm sure. So let's jump right into it. What is the first thing you want to know?
So I produced this thing. I produced this book
Mm.
and I think it's got some value and it's based around my experience. So my first question was, how do I use the book to build my business?
So let's start here. Tell me a little bit about, well, first of all, why did you write the book in the first place?
Good question. And why did it take 3 years is the other one. I wrote the book because I've spent, I don't know, 25 years running agencies, creative businesses and advising and being a board advisor. And what I realized was that this thing was going on where founders and entrepreneurs were constantly subsidizing their business at their own mental or physical cost. I didn't
Mm.
define it that well, and I didn't have a term for it, emotional overdraft, but I knew this thing was happening. And what I realized was that it wasn't inevitable. Whilst we all suffer from it, it is not inevitable. And you don't need to learn. I've got loads of business books behind me here, but you don't need to buy books, learn new stuff to change it. You can simply change behavior. There's nothing easy about it, but changing behavior is the answer. So I wrote an article and then I wrote what I thought was a book and I showed it to an editor and she said, "That's an article, Andy. That's not a book. You need to say more than that." But yeah, the driver was the desire to share insight with entrepreneurs, founders, leaders. It's broader than that, but that's the market I know. They're the people I know,
Mhm.
and they're the ones who. So really, it isn't to sell books. I don't think you make money
Mhm.
selling books. It's to spread the word, and in doing that, to make me more accessible to more people, and potentially generate some consultancy work for me.
Cool.
But the main driver is I really want to get the message out.
Gotcha. So then let's shift to talking about, because the question was about how you use it to build business. So talk to me a little bit about what kind of business you want. So obviously you wrote the book, you want to get the message out there, but from a business standpoint, your hope is that it leads to what?
So my business model is consultancy. So I'm a board advisor to half a dozen businesses. I have the challenge that all individual consultants have, which is I'm two clients away from chaos and I'm two clients away from poverty. So I don't really, I've got a background in marketing. I've run advertising agencies. I know how to do marketing, but I know how to stimulate a lot of people to do a lot of things, buy lots of ketchup or subscribe to a service. Getting a few people to be ready to buy my service as and when I need them to is a completely different art to me. And that's where I struggle. So I want the awareness. I think the book can give me the awareness, but I don't want 50 people coming to me and saying, "Hey, Andy, can you help us?"
Mm.
Because I'm not set up to do that. I can
Right.
handle half a dozen clients at a time and I keep them for on average 3 or 4 years. So
Wow.
it's not,
Cool.
it's a bit
Okay.
tricky.
So talk to me about who is the sort of ideal client, right? So in a perfect world, who reads this book and says, I got to work with Andy?
So it would be probably, these terms are interchangeable. I think a founder of a business, a people-based business,
Mhm.
probably fewer than 100 staff in a growth phase. So it could be a 5-person business that's really wants to expand, or it could be a 50-person business that is seeing the infrastructural change to the next level, where they're looking for someone to come in and go, "You've done this stuff. Where are the bear traps?
Mhm.
How do we do this? How do we make better decisions more quickly?" So those people are
Okay.
the ones I'd like to read the book and come to me. And I guess I could develop some new product out of the back of this. I could
Mm.
develop some one to many services where I help people think about emotional overdraft or whatever. But my current model is a one-to-one consultative model on a monthly
Cool.
basis.
So I've got a few suggestions for you. And first, just want to start with some sort of general things to point out when it comes to sort of using a book to attract business. And the first one is that the messaging of your service and the messaging of the book needs to be aligned. So now, obviously, you've written the book, and the book may appeal to a lot of people, but your messaging around the book, and as you're promoting it, and as you're doing interviews or podcasts, and as you're talking about what it is, if from a business perspective, it's going to help a lot of people, but there's a certain segment of those people that you really ultimately want. And in terms of from the business side, so you want your messaging to talk about that. So, for example, you might talk about, look, I've seen a lot of agencies, I've seen a lot of people that are in this situation, and this is very broadly applicable. But what I've really seen is these particular people really struggle with this. And that's where you fill in the blank with your ideal client. Because what you want is when you're talking about it, and again, let's just say, for example, you get interviewed on a podcast or something like that, right? When you're talking about it, you want the ideal person, the ideal client to know that this is ideal for them, right? You don't want them to go, okay, well, maybe that's me. Like you want to highlight that stuff so that you're really attracting those people. So alignment in anything is huge, but in particular in this case, again, the book's already written, but the way you talk about it, the way you present it, the way you market it, even in some of the copy on sales pages and how you describe it, throwing in some of that stuff, it's a perfect fit for X, Y, and Z people, but it's really going to help X people. It's a must read for these people. And this is why, because these are the people that I've worked with the most. I've seen it firsthand, blah, 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 blah. You don't want them to think it's for them. You want them to think it's perfect for them. So that's how you're going to attract the right people to read it, which then in turn is going to attract them to you to hire you. The second thing, or another thing to understand here, is that a book is a news hook. So it's an excuse for you to get in front of other people's audiences. So that's another way for you to get business. It's a reason for someone to interview you on a podcast. It's a reason for someone to write a blog post about it. It's a reason for someone that maybe you know or have a relationship with or is an expert in that space to talk about you and mention you, right? And we'll get into some more details of this in a bit. But understanding
I'd
that,
call that
right?
a pretext. It's a
Right.
pretext for those discussions.
Exactly. And understanding that's a big part of the value of a book. The other thing is the book content, the book you've written is more than just book content. So almost literally every single thing in the book can be repurposed into social content, blog content, attract people into your world. Several years ago, I did some work with a veteran movie producer in Hollywood, and he put out some memoirs that were stories of his experiences working on movies. And the first thing I said to him is, let's get these stories out of the book and onto the web. There's no such thing as giving away too much of it. And what I said to him, and I think it's true for you, the best way to sell a product is the product itself. So what I had said to him is, let's pull your best stories, let's put them on your website. We actually ran Facebook ads and stuff promoting them because I was like, someone that reads this amazing story, because this person was not like a household name. He had worked on movies and worked with people that were household names, but he was not like a quote unquote famous producer. So no one cares about your memoir until they hear the amazing story about you working with Jack Nicholson or whoever it was. So pulling stuff from the book, like you should have more than a year's, you can almost have a lifetime's worth of LinkedIn posts and social content and blog posts and all this stuff that you've already written. So you want to use that. Don't think of it as, oh, I put it in the book and now it's just locked in the book and I tell people to get it to read it. That's a way to get more value out of what you created, which is going to then attract people, which is then also going to attract more business. The other thing here is that when you publish your expertise in a book, you also create a launch pad if you know how to leverage it. So I want to share with you 3 ways to use your book as a launch pad. You don't have to do any of these. You don't have to do all of these, but I think it's helpful to see opportunities that are there. So the first one is you can use your book to launch a community. So whether that be a paid or free community, you can create a space where readers who resonate with the book can connect with each other and you. Your book is actionable, at least it should be in some ways. And a community creates a space for people to take the actions you recommend and get help and support from others that are doing the same thing. So it takes this static thing and turns it into sort of a living, breathing thing that can attract people. The second way to use your book as a launch pad is you can use it to launch an event. And you have an opportunity to literally bring your book to life. And this event could be virtual, it could be a real life event. But what it does is it creates a way to turn a book into a movement. It doesn't have to just happen once, although it could. And it doesn't and shouldn't just be about you. But the idea is to brainstorm what were to happen if you created an event around the concept of the book, bring all the people who influenced your work or you've worked with together, who are referenced in the book or have stories to tell that relate to it, and create a unique and potentially profitable extension of your book. And even if you did it for free, even if the smallest version is a free virtual event, but that becomes great promotion for the book as well. And you record it and you have a million things that you can share with other people. So using the book to launch an event is the second way you can use it as a launch pad. The third way to use your book as a launch pad is to use it to launch a podcast. Whatever expertise you shared in your book isn't static. It's current as of the moment and as of your experiences up to this point, but it will evolve. Your take on it will evolve. The people who are implementing your teachings will evolve as a result of reading your book. And a podcast gives you an opportunity to extend the life cycle of the book and give people who found it helpful a place to go next. Basically, it's a way to turn a one off reader into an ongoing relationship. And as I'm sure you know, that unlocks all sorts of opportunities for your business down the road. So, to sum up, if you think about your book as a launch pad, you could use it to do three things. You could launch a community, you could launch an event, you could launch a podcast, all three tied to and coming out of the book. And they expand the book into a much bigger universe, which ultimately leads people to you and helps you generate more business. Any questions about any of that?
It makes complete sense. I do have a podcast. It's 7 or 8 episodes in, so it's
Mhm.
nascent, but it is, and I'm getting people approaching me now who are really interesting. I'm getting great people coming on it. So it has the ability to suck people into it. So as you say, you're spot on. It really is. But the
Yeah.
community, I started a LinkedIn page for this and I thought, no one's going to want to talk about this
Mhm.
but of course I'm discovering that everyone wants to talk about this. So the community and the event they're obvious, but they're not obvious.
Yeah.
They're part of the conversation and they've just been lost along the way. So they're great and pretty frictionless, pretty easy to do as
Yeah.
well. So yeah,
Awesome.
it's fabulous. Yeah. I also
Yeah.
said earlier on, you said you can't give enough away. And I just think
Mhm.
that idea of I could be very precious about the 52,000 words in the book, but me sharing lots and lots of stories and it's full of stories and it's full of
Yeah.
actionable content isn't going to stop someone buying it. If they hear the stories and
No.
like them, they'll buy the book anyway, if they're going to buy the
Right.
book. And,
Exactly. It's
in
gonna
the end,
encourage
that's not
them.
really the point.
And even your most loyal, dedicated, whatever, they're on your email list, they listen to your even your super fans still are only gonna see a fragment of what you post because of algorithms, because of a million things, right? So no one in history has ever gone, "I'm not gonna buy that person's book because I've read everything that he's posted." That it doesn't work that way, right? If they're paying attention and they see it, it's because they like it, and then they're definitely gonna buy the book, right? So you're never it's very easy for us to feel like, oh, but if I give it all away, it's just not a thing that happens, right? Cool. So let's get to your second question. What's the next thing you want to know?
So my second question was, when do I give the book away? At
Mhm.
what point in the process do I give the book away? And I have plenty of copies of my own and I am happy to give it away, but when is the right time to do that and when isn't? And for example, I had a new client meeting or prospective client meeting last week. I met the leadership team. I took 4 books with me. I handed them out at the start and it changed the nature of the conversation. Not because they read the book instantaneously, but because they were given a book with my picture on the back and it was real and they flicked through it and there was authority. I know there's value in it, but I just don't know, it's easy to give stuff away and it's easy for
Yep.
people not to value free stuff. So where's
Yeah,
the
no,
balance?
there's a ton of value of it. And it's funny because when I saw that you wanted to ask this question, and you said, when do I give the book away? Literally, the first thing that popped into my head was I was like, always. I was like, when do you not give it away? I think it's really important to sort of understand the value of a book and that the value of a book is the more people read the book, the more valuable the book is that the money and the financial rewards, and especially someone in your situation where ultimately, you're going to make more money from opportunities that come from the book that are not just the quote unquote book sales in most cases, right? So how do you increase that value? You increase that value by getting it into more hands and getting more people to read it, not by trying to you're not actually optimizing for sales. You're optimizing for reads.
I'm
And
not
those are
J.K.
two
Rowling.
different.
I'm not making my living from selling books.
And by the way, here's the other thing that's interesting about it is that the more people read your book, the more sales you're going to make because they're going to tell other people to buy it. So what's interesting is that by optimizing for reads, you actually in some ways are optimizing for sales. It's just a different way of thinking about it. So I think with that said, that your goal should always be to get as many people as possible to read the book, not to sell as many copies as possible. And I truly believe that the more people you get to read it, the more people you will get to buy it ultimately. So with that in mind, I'd say give the book to anyone that is remotely interested in hiring you. I think you can use the book also as a way to qualify and validate potential clients. So something that's interesting is if someone's thinking of hiring you or they seem like they might be a good fit or you're talking to them, whatever, and you can get them, you can give them your book and they read it, or even if they browse through it or they whatever, one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to make them significantly more or less likely to hire you. And either way is good for you because if
Qualifying
they
and qualifying
resonate
out.
with you,
Yeah.
if they resonate with the book, they're a perfect client for you. And so that's great. They're going to make them more likely to hire you and more willing to pay more to work with you. If the book doesn't resonate with you, then they probably weren't a good fit to begin with. And even if they hired you, it probably wasn't going to work out well. So in that way, the book is a filter, but it's only a filter if you can actually get them to read or actually at least browse through and check out the book. As far as what you should hope to get from giving away a book, again, I think there's a variety of value here. So getting the book in the hands of people is number one, obviously it creates more awareness of you. Number two, it creates an opportunity to drive more word of mouth. No one's going to talk about a book that they haven't seen or haven't read. Very few people are going to go, oh, I've never read this, but I hear there's this book about this. Maybe you should check it out, whatever. It can give you testimonials, right? Both to help sell the book and also people saying this is a great book helps you sell the book. It helps you in a variety of other ways. It can lead to opportunities, right? Someone who reads the book says, oh, I'd love to have you come speak to my team or speak at this conference or come on my podcast or whatever. Obviously, it can generate sales. Like I said, the more people that read it, the more people tell others to buy it. And it can generate clients like we talked about before, right? Like a person who's read your book and likes it is more likely to hire you than someone who hasn't. In terms of when and who you give it away to, here's something I strongly believe. So I think the value of writing a book isn't just in selling it, it's in giving it away. And I put together 8 groups or types of people that I think you should give your book to for free because it will unlock a lot of value for yourself. So the first one is potential clients. Anyone considering hiring you should get a copy of your book. If it resonates, they'll be more likely to hire you and pay you more. If it doesn't, they won't hire you and you'll have avoided a potentially bad fit client. The second group of people that you should give your book away to for free are previous clients. So, previous or existing clients. Not only is this a nice thing to do, but the people you've helped before are likely to know others you'd be able to help too. When you give them the book, send them multiple books, at least 2, and invite them to the other books to someone they know who will find it helpful. This is like a testimonial on steroids. You give someone multiple books, they are going to give it to someone else. And the chances are your best clients or previous successful clients are going to be able to find people that are a perfect fit for you better than you ever could. So give them, again, at least 2 books and say, here, give this to someone else that you think would find it helpful. Basically, they're doing lead generation for you. The third group of people that you should give free books to are thought leaders with an audience that you want to reach. The best way to grow your audience is to borrow other people's audiences. So find someone who has a following that's likely to find your book valuable and do whatever you can to get it in their hands. An important note here, a audience or a following doesn't mean that they have a million followers or a huge email list or whatever, right? Someone that has a 20-person email list, if the 20 people on that list are perfect for who you want to reach, is super valuable. So don't get caught up in, I have to go to people that have these huge audiences. Someone that has a small LinkedIn following, but you know that the people that follow them are the exact people your book is designed to help. Hey, can I give you books to give away to your people? If I give it to you and you read it and you like it, will you talk about it? Any of that kind of stuff. And even if you don't ask, just give it to them and see what happens, right? I've had people give me books that I read and then months later I go, oh, you know what? I was reading this in this book and it's pretty good and you should check it out. The fourth group of people to give books to for free would be podcast hosts. You can pitch yourself to appear on relevant shows or just send the host a copy of the book because you think they'll find it valuable. If they do, they're going to want to have you on the show, right? So you can pitch yourself and say, hey, here's the book. Or you can just go, you talk about X. I wrote a book. I feel like you'd find it interesting. Here you go. If they read it and they like it, they're going to reach out and go, oh, I got to have that guy on the show. Related to that a little bit is journalists. I think you should give free books to journalists, but not just book reviewers. If you write a book about HR executives, for example, go find a journalist who covers the HR industry and send them the book. So this can do two things. Number one is it might get you coverage of the book. They might want to interview you and talk about it, but it also puts you on their radar as an expert that they might want to reach out to for quotes in future articles. So really helpful to, again, not just book journalists, not just book reviewers, but journalists who cover the space that your book speaks to. The sixth group of people that it's worth sending free books to are professors or teachers, really anyone who has the attention of a group of people who want to learn the thing that your book is about. They just might spread the word to their students or invite you to speak to them, right? It's very easy for them to go in class, say, hey, I read this great book. I recommend you guys check it out. And who knows, maybe they even assign it to them and force them to buy your book. Speaking of which, coaches and consultants are the seventh group of people worth giving free books to, the ones who work in your area of expertise. Because you know what they have? They have conversations with your ideal audience every single day. I personally am always recommending books to clients that I've read. I'm sure I'm not the only one who does so.
Mm.
So maybe they'd recommend yours. If there's a coach out there who works with your ideal client, hey, here's my book. Thought you might like it. Thought you might find some stuff helpful. Maybe they wind up talking to their people about it, etc. Maybe they wind up mentioning it in a course that they do. Again, I find myself referencing books all the time. And then the last group of people that it's worth sending free copies of your book to would be everyone that you mention in the book. Because you know who wants your book to be a hit almost as much as you do? The people that you wrote about and made look good. I wouldn't do this if you're writing about someone as a failure case study or they're a disaster. You probably don't want to send it to them. But assuming that there's people that you've referenced either as examples or things that you've learned from, or for example, maybe it's someone that you reference something they wrote in their book. Send them a book
I
and
do that
say,
again and
"Hey,"
again. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly. So if you go through and you go, who's everyone that I mentioned in this book? There's probably a decent sized list of people, companies, organizations, whatever. Send them all a book. Hey, wanted to let you know I referenced you. You're on page 26 and whatever. Again, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to spread the word to others and identify all those people. And that's really what this list is: clients, people you've mentioned in the book, like other people that you have relationships with. Give them the book for free. It costs you basically nothing. And a certain percentage of those people are going to wind up spreading the word. So that's my take on when to give books away for free, basically always and to almost everyone. Any questions about any of that?
no, this is why you have my favorite newsletter. This is, you just get right to it. It's fabulous, Josh. Thank you. They're really helpful. I scratched the surface of that. I thought coaches, because this is a soft metric, it's an unquantifiable
Mhm.
financial. It's not like financials. It's coaches don't have many metrics they can use. And I thought there is a way to quantify emotional overdraft in the book, so
Mhm.
that I could be sending this to coaches and saying, come on, this is giving you material
Yeah.
that you can
Yeah.
work with. So
And by
of
the
course,
way, I didn't mention this, but this goes along the lines of sort of coaches and consultants and people that have courses or communities. There are a lot of communities where, again, if it's the right alignment and you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'd be happy to come give a free talk, a free Zoom, a free whatever to your community. Especially paid communities are really interesting because you're speaking to a collection of people who have proven to pay. They're the kind of people that are already paying to learn certain things and get better and improve whatever. So finding those kinds of things, right? Maybe even if it's a big Facebook group, a LinkedIn, whatever, and you go to the admin and say, hey, if you want to do a live Q&A, happy to do it, right? And those people are all looking for ways to provide more value to their audience. So some of them will actually pay you for it. But even if they don't, it's a relatively easy ask, right? They know you're promoting your thing, but as long as they find it valuable and interesting, like, why not? It makes them look good. Look, I brought in this expert to talk to you guys. So again, other people's audiences are really powerful in ways that you can get in front of them. The other thing that you could do potentially, again, is let's say there's someone that is launching a course. Again, you want to aim at the right audience, obviously, but you find someone that's launching a course that or has a course that's going to appeal, and you say, you know what? I'll give you the first 50 people that buy your course, you can give them a free book. as a bonus, which they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And what's going to happen in that scenario is you're helping them sell more of their course because it's like a free value add. They're creating urgency. The first 50 people get this. But what's interesting is if that person has a large audience, they're promoting it to everyone. So you're giving away 50 books, but they just emailed the 5,000 people on their email list to tell them about your book. That can be interesting because you're getting broader promotion than the number of books that you're actually giving away, which
Yeah.
again, if you can find the right people and the right mix, can be really interesting. Same thing with even if it's not a course, right? A newsletter creator, a podcast host, or whatever. You go, hey, how you want to give away 10 books to your audience? I'll give you 10 free books. And all you got to do is mention in the newsletter, let them build whatever contest or first 10 to reply or whatever they do. But your reach becomes bigger than the number of books that you're giving away. So that can be interesting to try as well. Okay.
So it takes us back to when do you give it away?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, exactly. Which again is rooted in once you wrap your head around my goal is readers. I'm optimizing for readers. I'm not optimizing for sales. Because here's the other thing I have no idea what you charge, right? But if let's say one out of 500 quote unquote readers becomes a client because you don't need that many clients. And a client's hiring you for 3, 4 years, the amount of money that client is generating more than pays for thousands of books that you've given away. So it's really interesting that even financially, because of your business model, it's different if you're an author who has no consulting service, who has no monetization. And you're like, well, if I just give away my books, how am I going to make any money? Your book is a marketing tool. Basically, it's not a money maker, right? Whatever money you make on it is great. It's gravy, right? But ultimately, the money you'll get from a client, and you don't need many of those clients to convert. So one client pays for a lot of free books if you think about it that way.
Really does.
Cool. So let's get to your third question. What is the next thing you want to know?
So I was going to ask you, well, I will ask you, does the book need to be a bestseller to have authority, to have impact? But I guess maybe an evolution of that is also in other countries because it's an English language book. So I've got the UK,
Mhm.
Australia, but the US is 10 times the size of the UK. So the authority question came from that thought. So does it have to be a bestseller to give me the authority to then do the things you're talking about?
So I love this question because it gives me a chance to talk about authority, not just in the context of books, but authority in general, which is something I haven't really talked about and something that I see and hear all the time from people and experts who are like, do I have enough authority? They get it's funny because even when I use the word experts, people get very shaky about, am I an expert? Could I call myself an expert? I'm not an expert. So authority is complicated. And again, this was another one where like I had an instantaneous reaction to the question, right? Does the book need to be a bestseller to have authority? No, absolutely not. So, and I'm going to go into a bunch of reasons why. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about authority. So, in the context of this, and you asked the questions and chose the word, how do you define authority? What do you, when you say, does it need to be a bestseller to have authority? What do you mean by that?
I suppose authority in the sense of this question, it means credibility, where it's a bit like branding, isn't it? Where authority means that you don't have to explain it in detail, just that your history, your experience, your CV, who you work with says, yeah, this person's credible.
And with credibility, obviously comes trust. Like they
Yeah.
trust that what you're talking about and they should pay
Ultimately, it's
attention
trust.
to
Yeah.
you and
Yeah.
et cetera. And enough trust that you are worthy of their attention would be another way of putting it. So a few different things here, right? So the first one is I want to talk about the sort of bestseller angle. So the first thing is to keep in mind, and I know it's all relative, but your book's not going to be a bestseller because it's niche. And it may be broad. It's broader than niches. There are really micro niches and some are broader and whatever. But no matter how amazing your book is, it's probably not going to be a bestseller. Now, yes, you can make a bestseller among business books, you can you can play whatever game you want to play as authors do, right? There's a million books that are bestsellers and it's okay, bestseller in some tiny category on Amazon. It was a bestseller for 6 minutes on whatever. I think a lot of times people compare it to if you look at true bestsellers. James Clear writes Atomic Habits and it's a bestseller. Well, habits is applicable to literally everybody. Not everyone's interested in it, but it's potentially applicable to literally everybody. Most experts that are writing books are not writing on topics that are applicable to everybody. No matter how amazing your book is, it's not going to be Atomic Habits because one is just a much broader category, much wider potential audience and market. So, what's interesting is if you start to connect authority to bestseller or sales number, that's already a losing battle. And lots of people have authority that don't have bestsellers. And I think zooming out, this is a broader point that's really important to think about or understand. Sales numbers, just like view counts or download numbers or any of that stuff, they don't create authority. They're measures of popularity and they may open doors and they may generate attention, but authority is created by what you say, not by how many people have seen or consumed what you say. And what I mean by this is, I'll even take myself as an example. I've never published a book, but I have lots of authority because of what I've said, shared, and done within a certain audience. You just said a minute ago, this is why I love your newsletter. I have no book. I certainly don't have a best selling book. Authority is earned based on people consuming what you put out there, not based on how many people have bought it. So that means that your authority isn't rooted in being an author. It's rooted in being an expert on the things that you talk about and that you showcase expertise on. And what's interesting is sales numbers only reflect your ability to publish a popular book, not your ability to be an expert on a topic. It's two completely different things. And what I think is interesting about this, I'm going to take a sort of detour here and reveal a little of my background from working in the entertainment industry. It's perfectly relevant. So I want to share a quick history, quick recent history of the movie business. So movies in the past 10, 15, 20 years are largely making more money than they ever have before. But you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that says movies are better than they used to be. So if we're looking at bestseller metrics of authority, you'd be like, oh, well, movies are now making so much money. They must be better, right? The equivalent of quality authority, they must be better, right? They're making more money. But that is largely not the case. Well, what has actually happened is the movie business shifted in the past couple decades. And the way hit movies used to happen is a movie would come out in relatively limited release and it was good and there was word of mouth and people would talk about it and the movie would grow. Now, what happens is movie money is made in opening weekend, which means that movie money is made before anyone's seen the movie, which means the quality doesn't matter as much of the marketing. This is also why every movie is now a remake because it's easier to market a movie about a comic book hero that everyone knows than an original thing, right? Fewer and fewer original things, more and more remakes, more and more stuff based on intellectual property because the business shifted where movies had these massive openings, right? In 4,000 theaters and whatever. That didn't used to happen. So the way you had a hit movie, the way you had a bestseller used to be you had a really good movie that grew over time. Now it's all about opening weekend. So the other thing that's happened is the people in charge of making movies, studio heads are typically coming out of marketing departments. They're not coming out of production departments and development departments. So what's happened is the people making movies now are marketing movies for opening weekend. They're not experts at making great movies. And that is a shift. And so the whole business has shifted and adjusted as a result of that. It doesn't mean they're not experts. It doesn't mean they don't have authority. What they have authority in is getting people to see a movie, whether or not it's good on opening week. Different skill set. So to shift back to this book example, what a best-selling book proves is that a person was good at creating something that is going to appeal to a broad audience. They're good at selling books. They're an authority on selling books. It doesn't mean they're an authority at what they're an expert. So a bestseller doesn't mean that you're the person to hire to help me do this thing. It means you're the person to tell me how to sell a lot of books. So different things. So that's why I think your authority has very little to do with your ability to sell books. Would having a bestseller help? Theoretically, yes, but it
James, if
doesn't
you're
mean
James Clear and you've sold 16 million copies, it's so extreme that obviously it suggests that he has expertise or that enough
right.
people are buying it. But that's a ridiculous outlier.
Exactly. But what the book can do is it can help generate authority for you if you can get other people to lend their authority to you. So your ability to someone putting you on their podcast conveys that you're an expert. At least they thought you were, right? Somebody writing about it conveys that somebody else thought. So that can help build authority for you more so than mass numbers of sales. So, diving even a little deeper into authority, I want to share three common misconceptions I see experts have about authority. And the first one is that authority isn't binary. It's a spectrum. There's no such thing as you either have or don't have authority. It's all relative. So, do I have authority as a web designer? Well, not compared to an actual web designer, but compared to someone who doesn't know how to set up a WordPress site and install a template, I can do that. So I have authority in that realm, but I wouldn't say that I'm an authoritative web designer, right? Whether or not you have quote unquote authority as an expert is entirely dependent on who the audience is you're targeting and what they need. So that's really important to understand. You will have authority with a certain group of people. There is no, do I have authority or not have authority, right? It's completely context dependent. The second misconception I see experts have about authority is that credentials don't equal authority. And I think lots of people think that they do. Most credentials, I believe, are actually completely unnecessary. And that I found in most cases, the people who chase them aren't as good as the ones who have simply gone out and do the work. My pet peeve is people that are like, I'm going to go get this certificate. I'm all about learning how to do things. But to think that because you have a certificate that says you know SEO means that you're good at SEO is meaningless. I don't care what certificates that you have. Just by the way, in the working world, I don't care what your job title is. I've worked at companies that had 4 employees and been a vice president of blah, blah, blah. There were 4 employees. It doesn't matter that I was a vice president. Credentials can create authority or a perception of authority in the eyes of people who don't know you or your work. It's not that a credential or certificate is not totally useless, but whatever authority you get from a credential can be immediately lost once they discover you or your actual work. It doesn't matter. You can say, I'm an expert in this and I wrote a book about this. And as soon as they read that book, if that book's no good, the value of that credential immediately goes to zero. So if that's the case, if authority and credentials only slightly open the door and it can be lost like that, did you ever really have it in the first place? Versus, okay, maybe I don't have any credentials. Maybe I don't have a degree from some fancy school. I didn't go to Harvard Business School. But if you read a blog post from me and you're like, wow, that's really smart, suddenly I have authority. The value of the credential can go away very quickly, or lack of credential can be overcome very quickly. In a lot of cases, credentials just create an illusion of authority as opposed to actual authority. And then the third misconception that I see when it comes to authority among experts is I personally believe that you don't actually need authority. I think a lot of times people are hoping for authority. They want it to give themselves permission to come across as an expert or give people advice or whatever. But the truth is, you don't really need it. Authority is mostly an illusion, and not having it won't prevent you from doing anything that you want to do. I've found that in a lot of cases, the more someone thinks they need a quote unquote need authority to succeed, the more insecure they are about themselves and their work. It's that insecurity which is actually holding them back, not the lack of authority, the lack of a credential, the lack of sales, whatever. The thing that's holding them back is they're insecure in their own ability. And I'm not criticizing that. That's completely understandable. But a lot of times people are chasing the like, oh, I could get clients if I got this certificate or whatever. It's no, you could get clients if you got really good at whatever it is that you offer and that you want to do and put that in front of people. What you actually need more than authority is confidence, because confidence conveys authority more so than any type of credential, any type of sales number, whatever. Again, not that credentials and sales numbers are valueless. I understand that, okay, I'm maybe more likely to start watching a video from someone who's done X, Y, and Z, or buy a book from someone who's whatever. But whatever authority they have literally can go out the window in a single page. And vice versa. If you can get someone to read a page, you can get someone to read an excerpt from your book and they go, wow, this was really smart. You have all the authority that you need. So thank you for the excuse to rant about authority, because clearly I had some thoughts on it. Any questions about anything that I just said, which I know some people are going to have a problem with, but that's okay. There's
I,
people who spend a lot of money getting certificates are not going to like my answer to this question.
yeah, and I always think the certificates are the third level, aren't they? It's the kind of and prove it, but that comes
Yeah.
after. a lot of other questions. No, it makes perfect sense. And I think I've conflated bestseller with authority. I am an authority in my space. I know what I'm talking about, and it does have material impact on people's businesses. And they tell me that, and they tell other people that. So, and they retain me. So I know
Yeah.
that. I think it's right. I don't need this to be a bestseller, which anyone can get. Orange books with the word emotion in them. I'm the best-selling book this year. Who knows? So that is a bit of bull, but I think it's the idea of confidence and of being it rather than
Yeah.
saying it.
And you already are it, right? And I think that's the other thing too, is it's not false confidence, right? Like having to be able to say, look, going back to the origin of your book in the first place, right? I've worked with all these different people. I've seen the results. The fact that you have a handful of clients who stay with you for 3 or 4 years versus I've had 100 clients who always leave and don't have great things to say about working for me. The volume, which is a bestseller question, right? Like the more is more concept is really not true. And I think there's a strong case that can be made that it's, look, I've worked with 12 people I'm making this up. I've worked with 12 clients over the last 2 years. And here's what all 12 of them had to say. My business is structured to work with a smaller amount of people. Here's what they said. You can read the book or not. I'm just telling you, the people that I've done this with, the people that I've taught this stuff, have had amazing things to say. And even more importantly, have had incredible results in their business and their life and whatever. And here's what it is. And you can make a case that is a much stronger signal of authority than I got 12,000 people to buy my book, which, by the way, this is a total side note. And I'm not in the publishing industry, but if you saw the actual sales counts that it takes to have a bestseller, it's tiny,
Tiny.
right?
It is tiny.
And then you factor in that some of those authors are buying their own books to help get that number. And those are not the greatest indicators of anything. And again, this is another sort of entertainment industry side note. And I don't have a specific example, but you would be blown away if you actually go look at the download numbers on something like Spotify for something that is perceived as like a hit, right? And a lot of times that perception is, oh, this new artist put out an album and they got a ton of press because it's the new whatever pop star album. And then you go look at it and you go, but nobody's listening to that comparatively. You can actually see on Spotify how many listeners or whatever an artist has in the past month or whatever it is. And you will be amazed how often that misaligns with the public perception and the amount of press. They're good at getting press about their album. Nobody's listening to the album. Some other act has 3 times as many listeners in the past month, but they didn't get the press that person got. So authority and all of that and sort of perception is really different from the actuality. And then the other thing too is, again, especially with you and with most experts, the amount of people they need to perceive and value their expertise is tiny compared to what it feels like. If you had 50 people who read your book and were like, oh my God, I have got to work with this guy. You can't work with 50 people.
No.
So who cares about any of the other stuff? You're overbooked and whatever. You just don't need that much. So you don't need a bestseller. You don't need all of these things. You need handfuls, figure of speech, but you need just the right people to go, wow, this is amazing. And it's life changing and makes the book worth it and everything else worth it.
It's a fabulous reframe. Really
Cool.
helpful. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. Well, thank you so much for the questions. Thank you for giving me an excuse to rant about and talk about some stuff I haven't talked about before. Let people know where they can get the book, where they can find you, all that good stuff. Where should they go?
So it's the Emotional Overdraft is published on the 22nd on Kindle of January and the 23rd of January 2024 on Amazon and available in all good bookstores after that. And if they want to find me, you can go to emotionaloverdraft.com or my website, which is andybrown.coach.
Cool. And by the way, I don't think I said this before, but congratulations on publishing the book. No matter what happens, like that is an incredible accomplishment. So you've already won. Anyone listening, for more of my stuff, get my newsletter for theinterested.com/subscribe. If you'd like to come on this show and ask me 3 questions, go to joshspector.com/questions to submit them. Check out my skill sessions at joshspector.com/sessions. They're a series of 1 hour video presentations where I show you how to do things like grow your newsletter, get clients, create a product in a day, simplify your work. And also as a member, you get access to monthly Q&A coaching calls just like this. So basically it's a way to get ongoing help from me on a monthly basis in addition to all the sessions. That's about it. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you liked it, please share it, spread the word, however and wherever you choose to. That's it. I will see you next time with another episode of I Want to Know. Thanks.